Hey guys, today we're in the book of Genesis, chapter 35. Yesterday we finished 34, which was a horrible chapter. Today we turn the page. It seems like just amazingly what God does. If you think about yesterday's chapter, you read a whole chapter. Chapter 34 had God's name in it not once. We turn to chapter 35, God's name is in it 10 times, plus he has named other things like Bethel and other names of God 11 times. So we go from one chapter of God's no name, we see what happens, and now we see a chapter that is full of God and what truly changes. And so, verse 35, after this horrific event of 34, God told Jacob, arise and go to Bethel. Now, if you remember back in chapter 31, God told him to go to Bethel, but Jacob would not listen to God. And he says, go to Bethel, which, if you remember, means house of God, and dwell there and make an altar there to God. So he says, go back to the house of God and start worshiping God. He's showing Jacob that he has walked away from God and now he needs to renew and rekindle this spirit back with God. So Jacob told his household, we're going. And notice what he says. He says, put away the foreign gods that are among you. This is interesting, right? Because it shows us that there were gods. Remember, we didn't know why Rachel stole the idols, but now we kind of seem to know that there was idol worship going on in his family. But just a quick note about this, notice the family got right only after the man, the father, got right. That's still true today. The man of the house has to get close to God. And when he gets close to the God, he will always bring the family with him. So many times today we see moms or we see the women of the family or maybe the children of the family, but God has set up his family unit in a biblical way that the man leads the house so that he will bring the family with them closer to God. And that's exactly what happens here. Not only does he say, put away the foreign the gods, he tells them to change their garments. We will see later on in the Old Testament that this is called to consecrate yourself, to get yourself ready, right? That the idea of saying we are bad, we are dirty, and we will put on new. We're going to God new and afresh, which we see that even in Jesus. Verse 4, so they gave Jacob all the foreign gods, and notice this, and the rings in their ears. Now, we don't know much about this, but we do know by this context that the rings in their ears had to do something with idol worship. And what's here is interesting is he says, get rid of your idols. They could have kept their earrings, but they had this full cleanse of giving away everything that had to do with other gods than the God of Israel, of Yahweh. And so they get rid of this. And as they journeyed, it says a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them. If you remember the last chapter, after Reuben and Simeon kills everybody, Jacob says, oh, everybody's going to hate me. Everybody's going to come after me. But God protected him. He put a fear on all the people that they would just not come near. And they go to Bethel, and he built an altar, and he calls it El Bethel. Now, the word Bethel means house of God. El is simply the word God, so it means the God of the house of God, right? So this is really kind of saying, hey, this really is the place of God. And he goes there. And revealed to him where he fled from his brother, and Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, died. Now, we don't know anything about Deborah. This is the first time we see her name mentioned, but we do know by the end of verse 8 that she was somebody special because they called the place where they buried her Al-Halon Bakuth. Which means the oak of weeping. It was a sorrowful event. We don't know anything about her, but we can tell that the family loved her. God appeared to Jacob again And when he came, he blessed him, and God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall you be called Jacob, but your name shall be Israel." And so here, just once again, God comes to him again. They're back in relationship. He has moved to Bethel. They are worshiping. They have consecrated themselves. They have repented of their sins. And now there's a relationship between Jacob and God. God appears to him, and then he reminds him, "Remember, I've changed your name. You are no longer Jacob." Basically, what he's saying is chapter 34, that was Jacob. Well, let's work on you becoming Israel, right? That's the old you. I have a vision for you to be a new you. And that's what it is, what he's talking about. Verse 12, "In the land that I give to you, Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you." God says, not only am I have your future plan with changing your name to Isaac, but the same promise, the Abrahamic covenant, is going to be passed down to you. God is reminding him of his love and his promises and how he will keep those promises. Then God went up from him, went up from him. This tells us here that God was in a physical state. He was there, right? A pre-incarnate Jesus. They were talking, they were there, but God had left them, and Jacob gave a drink offering. He began and continued to give a sacrifice and worship. But we can see that as time goes on, we see that Rachel gets pregnant, and it's a labor, a bad labor, and she ends up dying. And before she dies, she names her son Ben-Oni, which means the son of my sorrow. But Jacob changes his name to Benjamin, which means the son of my right hand, which means honor or blessing. And so here, it's just a little kind of note that it's, excuse me, that shows what Rachel was going through at the very end. If you remember, of all the other children, it was like Leah and Rachel were in this kind of battle to have the most kids and who's going to get his love and all these things. At the end, now the children that she was wishing for is, she says, "This is the child of my sorrow." But what else is interesting here is if you remember all the way back to chapter 31, we have Laban comes and says, "Who stole my idols?" And Jacob says, "Nobody stole your idols. I put a curse of death on anyone who has stolen your idols. This curse have come true." She's the first one that dies, right? And so we see Rachel dying here. When Israel lived in the land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. So here we have we have the third son, right? We have Reuben, the first son, who's the oldest son. He lays with really kind of his stepmom, right? It's not his mom, but it's his mom's concubine. It's his servant, and so he lays with this, and Jacob hears of this. So just think about, for one, that's gross, but think about what's happened. And now we have Reuben, who has sinned greatly. We have Simeon and Levi, who sinned greatly in chapter 34. So now it's up to Judah, the number 4 son, that God's blessing would be passed down. Now the sons of Jacob are 12. We get a list of those 12 sons. And it says, these were the sons of Jacob. Even though Jacob is going to be called Isaac and God has plans for him, this is what we call today a very dysfunctional family. And we will continue to see how dysfunctional they really are. And Jacob came to his father Isaac. Isaac was 180 years old. He died. And notice the last verse. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried them. They eventually came back together and they buried their father Isaac. And so you would ask here, where's Jesus in these verses? Well, like I said, Reuben, Simeon, Levi have messed up. They've sinned severely. If you're going to say God's blessings and promises, is it going to flow through somebody who's full of sin? No. And so the next in line is Judah. And we found out a couple chapters ago that the nations of the world will be blessed through the seed of Judah. The Messiah will come through Judah. And so that's how it comes through the fourth born son, not through Reuben because he slept with his stepmom, not through Simeon and Levi because they killed a whole city, took children and their mother into slavery and were thieves. But now it is down to Judah, the fourth son. So I hope that makes sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 36. God bless.